What is up, you guys? Glitchiz here, and welcome back to the channel. I got a really cool video for you guys today. It's one that many of you requested in the comments, and that is my go-to ultimate farming and cooking guide. I'm going to try and combine them into one medium-length video here, cover everything you need to know about cooking some pretty nice recipes, where and how to get different ingredients, as well as go over the new farm that I built for the base, an in-depth tour of that, and kind of explain how I set it all up. I did misspeak at the end of my last video when I was going over a little trick for rerouting the pipes. I'll verify how it actually works when we get to that point a little later on in the video. But for now, let's jump right into the cooking side of things. So in the game, there's going to be a ton of recipes that you can find, blue recipes and even legendary recipes. Right out the gate, one thing that I'm going to want to recommend to you guys is to use an interactive map. One that I recommend is actually right here. That's the Once Human interactive map by Deopa, I believe it's pronounced. And they made a nice interactive map. Some of the things are a little outdated for full release, but the recipe locations are not. I confirmed that they are still all in the same locations. But if you click on this map on the website, you can go here. And by the way, I'll link to this as well as the menu that I'll go over here in a second down in the description, so you guys can download that as well. But once you open up the interactive map, as long as you turn off everything but the recipes, this is your little legend here on the side where you can check which things you want to show and what not to show type of thing. I only have just the recipes selected, so that will show all the locations of the different recipes that you can find. Obviously, as you get to the higher tiers, like fish and chips, that's going to be a legendary one, and things like that. So this will show every location for all of the rare legendary recipe blueprints. And once you get those, you just use them from your inventory, and that will unlock the recipe at your stove. So obviously, to cook this stuff, the first thing you're going to need is a stove. You have multiple tiers, some of which aren't going to be able to basically craft those legendary meals. You need to get the highest upgraded stove to do that. But depending on which tier you get, there's going to be some default ones that you can actually cook right out the gate that are just default with that tier of stove. So to get those, you're going to have to go to Memetics, and under, I believe it's the planting one, the very first one that you can get under logistics is the stoves. This will give you access to salt, sugar, and some other fruits, dried cactus and things like that. Some basically green food items that are very simple to make, things like that. And it also doesn't require electricity. As you invest a few more points, you can get dishes 2, which then gives you roasted meat and grilled fish. Some really good food items for energy early in the game. Moving on, we have air drying. This allows you to put meat on a drying rack and preserve it to gain energy there. The dried meat and the fish, I believe, reduces your hydration because it's kind of salty, I guess. But it does restore 40 energy. And the big thing with these is hydrated meats don't go bad. So once you make them, you don't have to worry about them spoiling on you. So even though you do lose a little hydration, that is a nice alternate food item that you don't have to worry about going to waste. Next, we have dishes 2. This is where we start getting into the blue ranking blueprints, as well as unlocks corn oil. We got the steak combo, pan-fried fish, fruit teas, and some different sodas that you can make for hydration. Moving on, we have the electric stove. This is going to be the upgraded one that will give you even more access to some better blue food items, as well as sanity gummies, which are really important, especially in the late game. Keep moving down, we get our refrigerator. This will obviously allow you to craft ice, which is required for certain legendary blueprint recipes, and also keep some of your spoilable food basically usable for an extended period of time. It reduces the fall off for its spoiling period. And then you can go into the integrated kitchen, which is the best electric stove that you can get. That unlocks caviar and butter for more advanced recipes. Moving on, we get to our bread and butter purple recipes. And again, all the ones that you lock in Memetics, you won't need to find recipes for. You just get these instantly as soon as you unlock it. So we got canned lunch meat, canned meat, really good for shrapnel builds, things like that. Stardust mushroom soup, fruity sanity capsules, as well as iced tea, stardust ratatouille, orange pie, preserved deviated chops, which is really good for farming acid. It increases acid drops, stardust pumpkin soup, and shellfish meat. So really good food items there. And then lastly, under dishes 4, we can get 3 exotic recipes called canned seafood oil, which is really good for basically mining and logging. If you can make one of these, you'll gain resources super quick. Then we have Stardust Energy that gives us a ton of hydration and allows a double jump for 2 hours, I believe. And then lastly, Stardust Raspberry Shaved Ice, really good passive buff that amplifies negative effects, increases the duration of all of those by 20%, which is really nice. So really good default food items here. Now, if you get the legendary recipes, they're going to start requiring more advanced, basically, food materials. Some of them will even require deviated versions of those same materials. So if you have corn, you can get deviated corn, and you'll notice those by certain plants out in the wild having like a red etheric glow coming off of them. If you see those on your routes as you're driving around, take a second to jump off the bike and go and pick those up because they're pretty rare. You can also get them a little bit faster by using a farm, which I'll go over a little bit later. But that is how you would go about getting the recipes. Just use that map, find all the best legendary recipes, upgrade your stove to the max level, and then start hunting down the food items that are required for them. Now, the big thing that I want to go over is that on the stove, not only do the items themselves have base stats, but they can actually get secondary stats depending on what type of meats that you use. So, for example, securement soup, by default, it increases the chance to secure deviations by 50%, but it also has long shelf life, dish durability by plus 20%. That's if you're using the yellow lotus. If you select this and basically pick a different flower type, as you can see, the buff is going to change. So sage, for example, this will give dish durability 20%. Sage gives a dish bonus of only 10%. So depending on what secondary buff you use, the effects of that food item will change. Another good example would be something like, we'll do Stargaze, and let's do honey glazed meat, for example. So it, by default, has 15% bonus crit rate, which is a really good food item to have. And it also gives plus 25 stamina when using deer meat. But if you select the self-select option and use something like beast pork, that won't give any bonus. If you use pork instead of the secondary bonus we saw before, this will give plus 50% max HP. Rabbit meat will give plus 40 stamina. So depending on what type of meat option you choose, it allows you to pick multiple variations for the same food item. And depending on what meat you choose, that will change the secondary buff that you get along with the core buff for that particular food item. So keep that in mind. So now that we've gone over the different options for meats and the buffs that you get, bear meat is a really good one. That gives you plus 100 HP. I love using bear meat because it gives a really nice HP boost. And while I'm here, a really good spot, if you don't know, to farm bears in particular is actually right here. It's in the far edge of the Chalk Peak territory, and these little holes on top of this mountain, basically this entire mountain is hollowed out, and it's this giant underground cavern, and it's basically a massive bear den. You go in there, and there's literally like 30 plus bears that are just ready to be chopped down and have all of their meat taken. So if you want to get that nice health boost, this is a great location to farm bears. There are going to be bears all throughout along the coast and things like that. But if you just exclusively want to hunt down high quality bear meats and get the pelts and things like that, which are also good for crafting armor and whatnot, this is a very, very good spot for high quality meats, and I recommend you check it out. There's also a morphic chest and a weapons chest in here as well that you can grab. So definitely a good spot to check out. Now, for a quick tutorial, instead of going through and hunting all of these down, if you want a quick reference sheet, the thing that everyone requested that I mentioned in the previous video is a unique custom menu that my hive mate Ralphie created. She's our basically go-to cook for the entire hive. She loves the farming and cooking aspect of the game. So all of our deviated food items we just give to her. She crafts all the best food items that we need whenever we want it. She's got them on stock. But she made a custom menu that I want to share with you guys as well. And if we go here, basically going to be a Google Doc sheet, and I'll put that on my private server that will have open permissions, and you guys can just download this and use it for yourself. And she's basically organized it by basically topic of what you're going to be using it for. So right out the gate, we have the Economist. This is for easy and cheap foods that are still pretty decent. We've got the canned lunch meat. It tells the base stat and then a list of the extra stats depending on what type of meat choice that you pick. Basically what I just went over. She has it all labeled out here. So pork will give you plus 50 health. Bear meat will give you plus 100 health. Goat meat, slower recovery. Sanity gummy is plus 2 stamina boosts. So for every one of these little listings that she's made, she's also put the extra bonus stats and what is required to give you that buff right next to it. So you can just have a quick lookup guide at any given point for any food item instead of having to sit there through the menus and figure it all out on your own. So we got canned lunch meat, canned meat, shellfish meat, and then the Stardust Raspberry Shaved Ice. This is what we unlock by default with that final tier in the Memetics tree. But then as you go on, we've got iced tea, Stardust energy drink. Those are basically your cheap and easy to cook food items there. Moving on, we have one for Level Me Up. For those of you that don't know, the orange pie gives you plus 25% experience gain. So if you're able to find this recipe and craft it early on, that will help you level a lot quicker as you're clearing out dungeons and things like that. And this 1800 basically seconds is approximately 2 hours, I believe. So it lasts quite a long time. So really, really good buff to have if you want to level up a little bit quicker. Moving on, we have one for PvP, Defense from Griefers. It's called the Safety Sandwich. This is another exclusive recipe that you can find out in the wild using that map. That gives minus 20% damage taken from other players in particular. So really, really good if you're on a PvP server. Then we have the Gathering Squad section. This is for all the basically people that love foraging for all the supplies. These will all give buffs to things like that. Apologies for my phone. We have the Bacon Burger. That gives a 30% chance boost for bonus materials for mining and logging. That also has secondary extra stats depending on the meat. Then we have Canned Seafood Oil, which gives a big, really big boost to mining and logging. If you can make one of these, this is probably the best one in my opinion. This whole chance to get up to 66%, 666%, or 6,666% is absolutely crazy. Basically like 1 in every 10 to 15 breaks, you can potentially proc this 6,666% yield. And if you do that on a high quality item like copper or tungsten, for example, or a tree, you can get like thousands of logs with one stroke of the axe if you're lucky in this procs. So really, really good food item for basically material gathering if you can pop one of these before you head out on a material run. Moving on, we have anti-gravity milkshakes. This basically allows you to carry more stuff, increases your max load capacity. Tacos increases your gathering and logging speed by 20% and gives you a 50% extra buff to the yield. Veggie stir fry increases sprint speed. Potato salad, 15% chance to double the amount of stuff that you get when basically crafting things on the stove. So really, really cool buffs. I don't want to go through all of them, but as you can see, she has every single one of these. Save my sanity, everything based on sanity. She's got them all categorized and grouped up by basically the purpose of what each type of food is. So it's really well organized. All the stats are listed there, and it's just a really good cheat sheet to just take a quick look at for whatever build you're running. And again, I'll leave a link to this down in the description so you guys can have a copy of your own. Just make a duplicate of it and save it for yourself and use it whenever you want. So that'll be free for everyone. But moving on, the next thing I want to go over is the farm. Now, if you don't have one of those buffs and you're not into going out in the wild and farming everything yourself, at least for the food items, I do recommend building a farm, or at least one person in your hive building a farm. And that is the thing that I spent the last 2 days building on our server. And so let's head up here. Here is the new and improved Synapse Stronghold farm. I will say that I did testing, and one sprinkler can actually fully 100% water a 5 by 5 grid as long as you put the water sprinkler in the middle. So in theory, this is 5 wide, but I only have them 3 deep because if I made it 5 wide, the two platforms would start colliding. So I figured 70 crops was enough. I don't need to have 5 by 5 5 times. It's just hundreds of crops. I don't really need it. So I just did 3 by 5, but technically you can have 2 more rows of 5 out this way, and as long as you have the sprinkler in the center, that will water all 5 by 5 crops completely with just one sprinkler. And the sprinklers are only 2 watts a piece. So really efficient way to farm. Mine could obviously be even more efficient if I wanted to add more plants, but aesthetically wise, it wasn't necessary. And we also have someone like Ralphie who does all of our cooking for us. She's got an amazing farm as well, so it wasn't totally necessary. But then the next thing you're going to want to worry about is the lighting. Now, I have a whole guide going about this. I linked that into my previous video as well, and I go over how lighting works. Basically, everything in Once Human is a physics-based system, and so things like water pumps move off gravity, so you want to make things lower than the things that they're running into to change the flow of water. Same goes for lighting. So if you have a light and you basically hold it right next to an edge of a wall or something, the beam of light is going to be much more concentrated and smaller, and it's going to basically radiate on much less things. However, if you raise a light higher in the air, that light will then disperse and cover a larger area, and that is exactly how it works in the game of Once Human. So that is why you see here I have these arch ceilings in my greenhouse. It's because I wanted to lift the height of my basically lamps, and as long as you're approximately like 2 wall heights high, you can cover that full 5 by 5 grid with just one light. It'll cover the whole circumference of that entire setup and basically do everything you need. I have a little overkill here because my setup's a little bit smaller, but just so you know, if you raise the light up high enough, you can cover a ton of crops with just one light, and those are only 1 watt a piece. So between all 5 of my setups, that's 70 crops total, I'm only using 3 watts for each times 5 is 15 watts total for the planters themselves. Obviously, we have a little bit more for things like this little basically brewing barrel. The osmosis water purifier is 10 watts. These little pumps are 1 watt. And then obviously 10 watts for each of my water pumps down below. I have 5 water pumps going. So I can go and show that off. Wrong side. But on the back side, I've got 5 water pumps going to pump that purified water up and keep my sprinklers running 24/7 if I want them to. I never have to worry about refilling them. So that runs straight up to that water pump that you saw to constantly water my crops. But moving on, as you can see, if you watched my previous video, I actually misspoke. I showed a really cool, basically, insider pro tip on how to align your piping. Because before in my last video, if you guys saw it, I had a bunch of like fanned out blue pipes crisscrossing throughout the base, and I was talking the whole video about organizing your wires and pipes to have it not do that. So I wanted to make sure I got it set up properly to where it was nice and clean. And what I demoed was, even though these water pumps take 1 wattage to power if you want to physically move water, they still operate on a physics-based system. So what you can do is, much how the nodes are used to reorganize electrical wires, you can actually use these water pumps as basically a node equivalent, but for your piping. And the best part about it is, if you're only using it to reroute the direction of the piping, you don't have to hook it up to power, so long as it's lower than the previous pump before it. So basically this one here, in order to get the water to flow in the right direction, I just had to make sure that this pump, basically the valve of it, was lower than the top valve of the machine before it. So the osmosis purifier in this case. So because it was lower, I don't have to worry about power, and the water will still flow in the right direction. And you know the water is flowing in any given direction based on the direction of the pulsing light. If I was to raise this up, for example, so where it was above the water purifier, you'll see what happens. Now it's flowing in the opposite direction because gravity is going to go from top down. That's why you have to put your rain catchers higher than your water purifier, et cetera, and you got to work your way down and kind of build things up. What I showed in the video was the mistake I made is I put this here and got the first two working properly. But then when I came over here, I planted this thing a little too high, and the water started flowing in the wrong direction. I'm like, why isn't this working? And then I was like, oh, maybe you just have to pay the 1 watt and get the water to pump in the direction you want again. But realistically, I was actually wrong. You don't need any wattage. I just had this thing a little too high, and I realized it after I stopped recording. All you had to do was basically lower this a tad bit more, and you'll notice that as soon as I lower that just a little bit, oh, I gotta find the sweet spot again. Come on. There we go. So now you can see that everything's pumping in the right direction. And then what you do is once you have this little shoot off here, instead of having it go straight from here, cutting across the room, going to your sprinkler, straight from here, cutting across the whole room, going to your sprinkler, I now have it piped to where it goes around the entire outside perimeter, all flowing in the right direction. And then once it gets to one of these little checkpoints where one of the basically plots are, I do one little extra out, basically shoot out that comes from the middle and goes directly to the sprinkler. So now all my wires are tucked around the outside and nothing goes in the center, which is basically my whole mantra of what I'm trying to get everyone to do, is be neat with all of your piping and electricity. It helps with organizing things, especially if you want to add or remove new parts to your base that are going to require more power. It also keeps things neat for other players. So for example, if you go into the build menu, which we're already in, and hit L, you can hide all of your wires and plumbing. So on a day-to-day basis for myself, I pretty much always have these hidden. But other players, if they come to visit your base, like Hive members and things like that, if they don't have the wires and plumbing disabled just like we did, they're going to still be able to see all of your wires dangling all over the place if you don't have them organized. If they turn it off just like you did, then they should go invisible, I believe, but they have to set it themselves. If they don't, even if you have it turned off, they're still going to see them. So you're going to want to organize, if you're like me, a little bit of a perfectionist, and have everything as neat and as organized as possible, just so you know where everything is at and how it's managed, and makes the whole setup a lot more efficient and easier to organize. Now moving on to the crops themselves. Basically how you're going to plant things is you're going to create a planter's box, and that can also be found in the Memetics tree, same place that we basically got our stove. You go to logistics, the stove and stuff and food items is in the middle. This right tree is going to be for planting. So the first one is where we get loamy soil, compost bins. This is what we use to break down spoiled food into fertilizer to make our crops grow a little bit better and have a higher chance of becoming deviated crops. We have planters boxes, obviously required to make all the best types of plants and materials. Then you can also get upgraded fertilizers as well, which aren't necessarily 100% required. I didn't use any advanced fertilizers for this first run of crops, and I managed to get not only a deviant that spawned, but also 3 or 4 deviated crops out of my whole setup without any bonus fertilizer. But if you do use this fertilizer, that increases the chances of the deviated stuff appearing. Which is what you need for some of those legendary recipes, is the deviated food items. Next, you're obviously going to want the grow lights. This is going to be required to add lighting to your plants. And then lastly, under the water section, you're going to want to pick up basically water storage isn't necessary, but you're going to want either the water filter basic or the advanced osmosis purifier at the end for purifying the water, because the water that comes straight out of the river is dirty water and your plants don't really like that. It wants purified water, so have it run through the purifier first directly from your water pumps, and then from the water pumps you want to unlock automated irrigation. This is where you get your sprinklers, and the reason you want sprinklers is because, and grow lights for that matter, is because every single crop, when you look at it, whoops, we'll go and plant something else here. So every single crop, let's plant an onion for example. When we go to plant this, select a seed, which you can get randomly by collecting plants out in the wild, or different vendors in all the major towns also sell seeds as well on a, I don't know if it's daily or a weekly basis, but you can go there and buy a chunk of seeds. Onions are in like gray water, I believe. At the very top of the mountain, she sells onions. But then you select your fertilizer type that you want and then click plant. And then as you can see, once it's planted, every single different plant that you put in the soil has both an irrigation rating and a lighting rating. Now, this is where those sprinklers and lights come into play. Ideally, to get the maximum yield and best quality crops, you want to keep your plant during its growing process in the green at all times. And the best way to do that is with custom lights and grow lamps, because they have variable settings that you can put on to keep you in that setting. So for this in particular one, the onion, we want 100% lighting at all times and 90% water. So what you would do is you would plant your sprinkler, and then if you interact with the sprinkler, you see that target irrigation where you hit F. If you hit that multiple times, that value will change 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. That number is a direct correlation to the irrigation setting that we saw on the plant. So if the plant wants 90% water, then we want the basically irrigation sprinkler to be set to 90 power. Now, the one thing, unlike the lights are going to be instant. With the irrigation, when you put a fresh plant down, it takes probably like 30 to 40 minutes for the water to fill up. So don't be afraid when you set it to 90 and then look at the crop, for example. If I go to details, well, I already have water been going on this planter for a long time, so it's already at 90. But when you're planting something for the first time, that's going to only say like 2% in the beginning. But if you keep checking back every couple minutes, you're going to notice that that irrigation's slowly going to fill up. And as long as it's covering the plant fully, which it should, as long as you have it in up to a 5x5 grid, over time, within like 30 minutes, that should fully reach the exact value that you have your sprinkler set to. And then it's the same thing for the lighting. The lighting has variable, basically power as well. So if you look up at your light, if I get close enough, that has target lighting. So for the onion, we wanted 100% lighting. So I have the target lighting set to 100. But if you're growing a different plant, like potatoes or something like that, that wants a little bit less lighting, then you can change that target to 10, 20, 30, 40, just like you would the sprinkler, to match whatever crop that you're growing in that planter. So little pro tip, what I would recommend is if you have multiple plots like this, try and grow similar setting plants with all the same variations. Like for example, this onion has the exact same irrigation and lighting requirements as the cabbage. So that's why I put these all together, because I can set just the sprinkler to one, the lighting to one, and it will work for all the matching crops. Same thing over here for the peppercorn and mushrooms. They have a little bit different values. It actually might be the same, but some of them have different values. If they have a different value, try and combine them with other crops that have a matching value. Now, when you want to make things a little bit more efficient, there is some deviants that can help out with your gardening. One of which is the buzzy bee. The buzzy bee actually will hover around different crops and increase the chances of crops in your planter boxes to become deviated crops. Now here, for example, we have a deviated onion. So I planted a normal onion. Normally you would get a normal onion back, but because of different randomization, RNG, and potentially the buzzy bee giving it a little boost, I managed to get a deviated onion. This will be good for some of those rarer, basically recipes that require deviated food items, and you can go and harvest that. Also, little insider tip, if you didn't know, there is a deviant called the Grumpy Onion, I believe, that you can only get by growing onions in your base. So you want to save up a bunch of those onion seeds, and that is how you get that deviant, is you just plant a ton of onions, throw down a bunch of buzzy bees to increase the chances of it being deviated, and if you get lucky, instead of it being a deviated onion, you'll actually see the grumpy onion deviant grow out of your planter box, and you'd collect it right from your planter box. I unfortunately haven't gotten one yet, but that is how you get it. You can also get another deviant called the Growshroom from planting mushrooms. Great place to find these guys. They're also very helpful for your farm. The only reason, normally I would have 2 or 3 of these guys running, because what they do is they increase not only the speed at which your plants grow, but they can plant and harvest your crops for you automatically. So if you give them basically down in the deviation capsule, a certain type of seed that you want them to continuously plant. And as long as you got enough seeds in their little inventory slot, as soon as one of these plants finishes growing, they'll harvest it. It'll get stored in the deviation container, and then they'll come right back up and start planting more for you. So you actually don't have to plant them either. This little mushroom guy will do it for you. But you can actually grow these guys too. So here's a perfect example. Instead of a normal mushroom growing here, a growshroom grew here. And now I can just harvest him. And now we got a deviant from it. So he actually grew in my garden, which is pretty cool. Another way to get them is a really good spot I can recommend is in a cave system that is just north, right here, of the Sunbury Middle School. So right at this teleporter, just northwest of the Sunbury Middle School, you can see there's a little hole right here on top of this cliff. You're going to be up on a cliff here. If you turn around the second you leave that teleporter, there's actually a giant cave similar to the bear cave. There's another big cave that you can drop down into, and there is a ton of mushrooms in this cave. And you're almost guaranteed, I got it on my first try. It may take you 1 or 2 tries, but within 1 or 2 runs, ideally, if you collect every mushroom in this, you're almost guaranteed basically drop of that Growshroom deviant, just because there's so many in there to collect. I got really lucky, and the one that I got, actually, this is the new one, but I got one that had a max 5 skill rating, which is going to be really good for the farm. The only reason I don't have him working right now is I wanted a nice pretty farm for my video tonight, and if I had him up here, he'd be pulling all of my plants out and making it look all bare and nothing growing. So I literally only have him gone for cosmetic purposes right now. But the second this video ends, I'm going to throw that Growshroom back into the territory and have him get back to work. But yeah, we got another deviated mushroom here. Another good one for, and you also, when you pick up these crops, not only do you get the crop itself, but you also get a bunch of seeds. And usually the yield of seeds that you get is more than, obviously, it only takes 1 seed to plant it, but you usually get back 2 or 3 seeds. So if you grow enough of them, eventually you'll have enough seeds to just replant them over and over and over again, and you're never going to run out if you have a big enough variety. So what I do is I kind of think ahead. I think of whatever build that I'm running, whether it be like a shrapnel build or a frost vortex build, and then I look on my cheat sheet, the menu, at what food items benefit me the most for that type of build, and I see what ingredients are required for that particular food item. Once I know the ingredients, I go and find those seeds, and I plant them strategically in my farm, and then over time, all the required materials I would need for those really good food item buffs, I can just grow myself in bulk and make as many of those food items as I need. So that is the big benefit of having a farm, is you don't have to waste time hunting down all these very specific ingredients you need for your food items. With a farm, you get to pick and choose the exact seeds that you put down to craft whatever specific food item that you want at any given time. And there's just a ton of deviants to help you out. So I already mentioned the Buzzy Bee. He is the one that increases the deviation rate. We have the Growshroom. He's the one that plants and gathers crops for you and increases the speed at which they grow. But there's actually 2 more that are pretty helpful. One of which is the Rain Man. So if you're in a smaller base and you don't have access to sprinklers yet, you can use the Rain Man deviant to actually summon a rain cloud over your crops, and he will actually water your crops for you so you don't need a sprinkler. So early game, he's actually a pretty good deviant that can help out for irrigation. So feel free to pick up him if you want to help your territory. And then last but not least, the other one that's really, really good is actually, believe it or not, the Fetch-A-Lot Bunny. And you get him by chopping down those massive trees. If I look out my window, I can probably see that one right there. So if you find one of those massive trees, you'll need a, I think you can do it with a tungsten and the one that's lower, the alloy, tungsten alloy, and aluminum, maybe. Can't remember what the second lower pickaxe is, but you can't use a chainsaw. You have to use one of the top 2 tier, basically pickaxes. But if you find one of these giant world trees and run up to it, probably show a video clip here maybe, and chop it down, that's how you get the Fetch-A-Lot Bunny. And what he does is he actually will go out and gather shrubs in the nearby area around your base, and that will also give you a chance to collect seeds as well. So if you can't find them in the wild or get them straight from a vendor in a major town, just put your Fetch-A-Lot bunny in a container, and over time he'll just passively get you seeds as well. So that's another fun little way to find rare seeds potentially, depending on the zone that you're in. So yeah, that is pretty much the guide, you guys. As you saw, really clean setup. Everything is organized, no crisscrossing wires. We've got 70 crops, and because we have things strategically placed in grids, we only need one sprinkler and one light to fill all the crops in that given area. So really handy technique. Like I said, if you want to maximize the efficiency and go all out, you can add 2 more rows deep and have a 5x5 grid. And as long as that sprinkler is in the middle, it will water a 5x5 grid, which is a ton of crops. I just unfortunately don't have enough room, but there you go. Now you know that is potentially the max that you can get before it starts falling off. So feel free to build more planter boxes if you want. 70 is enough for me. But yeah, that is the ultimate cooking and farming guide. Hopefully you guys found it interesting and it helped some of you out. If it did, be sure to smash that like button, comment down below. I appreciate all of your guys' feedback. Also, if you want to keep up to date with all my future content, I've got plenty more guides coming down the pipe. Feel free to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of those alerts. And then lastly, if you want to join a killer community of like-minded gamers, feel free to check the links down in the description and join us on the Discord. We got almost 1,000 members in there now, many of which are playing Once Human and always looking for new people to play with. So hopefully you join up and we see you guys around here soon. But until the next one, hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you all later.